We are live for episode 234, Trek Live. How we doing?
Doing good. Excited to be talking about new Star Trek again. I feel like it was like 4 weeks, six weeks or something like that without new Trek, and it felt like an eternity. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to be talking about new Star Trek, even if it is lower decks.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm excited about it this morning.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. We have two episodes to talk about, which is why we're kind of dedicating the week to it. It's the beginning of a new season. There's two of them. Uh, and we kind of allocated some time for Star Trek Day stuff. There really wasn't any. There wasn't much news to unpack. There was a nice little package video that Jerry O'Connell shot that has some montages and some little bonus featurey kinds of things. Tawny Newsome and Eugene Cordero from Lower Decks reacting to some of the more wacky Star Trek moments. There's little cute things like that, but nothing to speak of as far as news goes, which we kind of figured. I think you were when we talked about it, you were like, yeah, there's not going to be any, and you were right. With the strike going on and with productions kind of halted, and we're kind of other than continuing Lower Decks, season 4, which we're in right now, and season 5, which isn't affected by the strike. Um, with Prodigy kind of in limbo, and season 3 of Strange New Worlds not really in production yet, and being halted by the production by the strike. There's really nothing to cover. So um, that's going to definitely you stall events like this as far as like dropping big news. I was hoping for a Discovery season 5 trailer or something to kind of promote that, but I guess it's still several months away, early 2024. So maybe it's a little early to be putting the pedal to the metal for that. So we're just gonna spend some time on our rewatch, which I'll ask you about now. See where you are on TNG season 7. I'll talk a little bit about nothing, not much. Busy.
To uh, TNG season 7. So
Okay,
I'm looking forward to getting back to it, but
gotcha.
hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
So I'll just touch real quick on I'm on season 2 of Voyager and season 4 of Deep Space Nine. About three-quarters of the way through both. Um, I just watched Hard Time was my last episode of Deep Space Nine, and my last episode of Voyager was Innocence. So some highlights in there. Deadlock is always a big time favorite for me. I think that's one of Voyager's best episodes. Regardless of the part of the show, early Voyager, mid to late Voyager, it doesn't really matter. I think in whatever you know bunch of episodes you want to stack together, I think Deadlock sits near the top for me of Voyager episodes. I think it's as like scary and intense as anything Star Trek's ever done. I think the Vidians are really, really terrifying in it. The way they board the ship, the way they're just ruthlessly, you know, whacking people and extracting organs and doing what they do is just alarming to see. That level of like you know insurmountable uh, you know activity coming from an adversary. You don't see that too often in Star Trek, and I just love the way that it's innovative. It's not as simple as like Year of Hell or Twilight from Enterprise. Like there's a pseudo reset button, but not really. Like these things happen. There's two Voyagers, and one of them goes, and one of them stays. It's a real techie science fiction, you know, kind of conceit to allow this to happen, but it doesn't resort to the reset button, everything's back to normal and nobody remembers it kind of tactic that Star Trek uses to some mixed results at times. Um, so that's a big favorite of mine. Hard Time from Deep Space Nine, the last episode I just watched, I think is awesome too. It's really tough to watch. It's grueling. It's harrowing. It's a really tough hour. I think as brutal as any hour of Star Trek. It really is heavy, unrelentingly heavy. But I think the genius of that science fiction concept is that you can almost like squint and feel like that idea would would be almost come across as like attractive to society instead of actually having to lock people up. Like do this instead of having to spend the resources and the manpower and you know, just the resources to incarcerate people to just do it in here and create trauma that will kind of debilitate the person. That it's kind of terrifying, and it almost sounds good in theory until you see it happen to somebody like Chief O'Brien, and see how terrible it is. And it's one of those things. It's as serialized as Deep Space Nine is, and as much credit as they get, rightfully so, for emotional continuity and having things carry from episode to episode. It's one of the weird instances in Deep Space Nine where they kind of don't pick this up. You never hear about this again. You don't see the effects of this kind of wearing on O'Brien for much time, unlike other things that happen to characters in Deep Space Nine. Um, I think things that happen to Odo and Kira, um, Cisco, obviously, Worf, big things happen to their characters and they kind of linger. They get talked about and dealt with for episodes later, even seasons later. But this one is kind of unusual. Like they do something so heavy to O'Brien, but they don't ever kind of come back to it. And I don't want to, especially for the other Star Trek shows, you can't knock for that because they don't tend to do it. Like Voyager and Next Generation, big things happen to Riker and Tom Paris, and they're not necessarily hanging around for future episodes. So this is no different than that. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those examples. We talk a lot about favorite and best. I have a hard time saying Part Time is like one of my favorite episodes because I kind of
It's a
dread
tough
it.
watch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see it coming and I'm like,
You
oh
know,
man.
you're not. Yeah, you're not popping this on like on a Saturday night for a casual Star Trek
No.
viewing. It's a tough watch for sure.
Yeah, you kind of need to brace yourself for it a little bit. You know, going in that it's gonna be grueling, it's gonna be challenging, it's gonna wear you out, but it's really good. I think Tom Meany's really phenomenal in it. That guest star who plays his prison cell mate is really great as well. That relationship's strong. I think it's probably it's a very different flavor of the O'Brien and Bashir friendship, but seeing them go through something like that, and be vulnerable with each other, and have that kind of yin to the yang that you usually get with the darts and the beer and the holosuite games and talking about marital stuff like the stuff that you get a lot of is great and it's real, but this is a whole different flavor that I think is also very real for really good friends, and I think it's really well handled. So um, really like Hard Time. Deep Space Nine season 4 is a machine. It chugs out great episodes over and over again. It seems like Rules of Engagement's one of your favorites. I think I don't know about favorites, but it's an episode that you always kind of reference. I feel like when you hit it, when we talk about seasons, as like a really cool entry. It's an episode that I associate with you for whatever reason. I don't know. I guess we talked about it more than others. Um,
Yeah,
there
it's
was
another classic courtroom kind of setup.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I know.
but yeah, really good. I
Yeah,
don't know for where it's at in Deep Space Nine and it being technically a bottle show. I think it's
yeah.
really good. Yeah.
It is. It is. Definitely got referenced a little bit in the wake of Ad Astra for Aspera. I think a lot of people were looking back at the courtroom. Maybe that's why it was kind of fresh in my mind as well, feeling like, yeah, this has been talked about lately. I think a lot of people were kind of harkening back to what are the other really good courtroom kind of dramas. And Death Wish is another one that I just recently watched from Voyager that I think is an early Voyager highlight. I think in my Twitter review I said it's Voyager's, for me, it's like their first real classic. Like first episode of Voyager, I've given like solid A to in this rewatch, and then Deadlock, right, kind of on its heels. So, um, but yeah, Death Wish is another one that is a straight courtroom drama for a big chunk of it. So both these shows kind of chugging along. I kind of knocked Voyager season 2 early on, as I still kind of stand by it. I think if I had to pick like a least favorite stretch of episodes, like more than 5, 6, 7 episode run, it's probably that opening half of season 2 of Voyager for me. I think it really struggles for a bit, but I'll tell you, late season 2 is kind of the opposite. It's pretty good, and there's a lot of serialization. I think I mentioned this last week. The Saboteur kind of storyline, the long con that Tom Paris and Janeway and Tuvok are playing that you don't know about until they kind of pull it to kind of smoke the Saboteur out. Um, I think the way that they play that with Paris uh, is credible. I think it's important to do that. I think one of the things people would always kind of scoff at or like wish there was more of is like not all these people on the ship are like obviously trained Starfleet officers, and with the rigidity and the schedule and the grind of it, like wear people down, and like these Maquis crewmen or somebody like Paris, like are they going to really do this for as long as it takes? And so for all that thought that should be rattling around in people's heads, seeing Tom Paris kind of start to come apart at the seams a little bit, or at least you think, it's believable that he would start to chafe at Chakotay and being a stickler for schedules and being on time and acting professionally. I think the way that's all handled is really really good, and you know I think season two with Seska and the Kazon and even the Vidians coming and going. Um, I think a lot of these episodes in late season two rely on the Maquis Starfleet conflict because of that stuff. Episodes like Alliances, where there's differences of opinion about how to handle, being out there and being in tough situations. Like, do we truly stick to like Starfleet ideals by the letter, or do we kind of operate like the Maquis and do what you got to do to get through that day, and make alliances with people that are unsavory, and not people you want to be around, because it suits the minute. Uh, there's for a lot of the criticisms that Voyager gets over the full run of the show kind of get answered at least early in season two, and maybe kind of fall away as the show keeps going. But it always kind of surprises me when I get to this part of it. How first of all how good it is, but how it's actually juggling like various serialized elements as well. So really really good Star Trek, and I'm really enjoying both. So I think that'll do it for. I could keep talking forever about episodes I've watched because I've watched a good bit of them, and I'm enjoying where I am, like I said. So I could keep going, but let's pivot into Lower Decks. We have Jeff and ER Mixon's craziest theories in the chat saying hello. Good to see you both. We're gonna start covering these first two episodes of Lower Decks, season four. We'd love to hear what you think as well, and we'll certainly interact with you if you want to share. Um, so I guess we'll talk about Twovix first, Twovix, spelled differently, but covering some of the same ground. Um, uh, what did you think of the season premiere and the heavy the sort of the Voyager episode, I guess, kind of like we got a Deep Space Nine episode last season. This is sort of a full-fledged Voyager kind of tribute show.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah,
I won't say that it's like, I don't know, knock my socks off
yeah,
or really started the season with a bang. But I think for whatever reason, that always happens to me when I go into Lower Decks. It always takes an episode or two to get back into kind of like the pacing, the
yeah.
tonal aspect of Lower Decks is much different than coming off the heels of Lord or
Strange, yeah.
Strange New Worlds. But for me, it was it was a fine episode. I think it was entertaining. It was definitely solid. It was really fun to be back on that ship.
Yep. The sets look
And
good.
then yeah, and yeah, that's kind of the beauty of I think Bill's right of this kind of medium is we can do things like
Yeah,
that. And um, yeah, I just find it interesting that only after 7 years of service, I think gets retired is kind of interesting. But yeah, it
getting
is
up there.
yeah, it's a historical. Uh, that's a kind of a big job to be able to. I don't know. At least I think the Cerritos is definitely getting some credit for
Yeah,
um, handling this mission. But no, I think it was a fine episode. Um, I think it's really really fun to kind of, and we can talk about the next episode as well. But just to be back with this crew and with these characters, it's just fun.
yeah, absolutely. I kind of echo that. I was really impressed by like the first 10 minutes of it. To be honest with you, when it opened and you first see the ship and it's before the shenanigans start to unfold, which I like some of too. But I feel like that magic in the first few minutes is the peak and probably my favorite stretch of both of these episodes. Like the first several minutes of the premiere, I think is really awesome. I think, like you said, the advantage of this, of what the animation world can bring, and what Lower Decks has done with both Deep Space Nine and Voyager now. When you think about it, like in Picard season 3, at the very end, you see the Enterprise D's bridge. You're back on the Enterprise D, but you're only on the bridge because obviously in a live action running TV show production limitations, they got to build one set. You didn't see the ready room, didn't see engineering. Like there's no off the bridge at all, um, which was amazing. Uh, but in Lower Decks, when they go to Deep Space Nine, you're seeing the promenade, you're seeing ops, you're seeing Cisco's old office, you're seeing corridors, you're seeing quarks, you're seeing the holosuite. Like we get around, like you see the whole thing. You feel like back home again. And then this kind of does the same thing. We're bouncing around from engineering to the bridge to sick bay to cargo bay 2 with the Borg alcoves and the shuttle bay, and we're
Shuttle
kind of
Bay,
everywhere.
yeah, yeah,
And the mess hall, seeing the mess hall and how perfect like the tables are,
yeah.
like it really makes you nostalgic and feel like, oh my god, like that's home. That ship for while you're watching that show, that's a cozy place, and there's a real advantage to that. So Lower Decks has done a really nice job of like really tapping into those things, and I think I give them a lot of credit for taking us back to Deep Space Nine and Voyager now, with these episodes. Um, but no, I would agree. I think it's I remember feeling the same way at the beginning of season 3, almost like jarringly. Oh yeah, I gotta like readjust to the 30 minutes, the fast pacing, the tone of the show, the kind of missions they're on, coming off the big of Discovery and Stranger Worlds and Picard, whatever was before when we get to Lower Decks. Um, I have to kind of recalibrate myself. I had a better time this season so far than I did in season 3, and I actually think I like the episodes in season 3 maybe a little better on now that they've like aged a little bit and I've looked back. I really like the premiere of season 3. If you remember, that's like the Cerritos is kind of grounded and they're running around Earth trying to get you know they steal the Phoenix from the First Contact theme park attraction. Um, I think that's a really good season premiere that has aged well in the last year. I don't know that this is quite as good. I think this relies a lot on those nostalgic feelings with the Voyager stuff, and that's what I think makes these two episodes different. I think they're very different episodes of Lower Decks. The first one really relies on that kind of feeling, like the love of Star Trek and the stuff that came before. Where I feel like episode 2 is more like a straight up Lower Decks episode that doesn't have a lot of that, and it's just the characters, and it's for better or worse, depending on how you feel about it. It's a true like fully fledged, um, just relying on Lower Decks like character development, and the arcs that have kind of gotten us to this point in season 4. So, um, but the obvious big thing with this first episode is the way it's dropping us into not just Voyager like broad stuff, it's Tuvix stuff. Like
Yeah,
we
which is still a very large topic of discussion that's probably going to be just argued over until the end of time, I think.
absolutely, and I think Mike McMahon obviously knows that and wants to fuel the fire and get people talking about this stuff. Um, there's some really good lines with characters on Cerritos, learning, doing their homework on how did Janeway solve this problem, and like, wow, Janeway doesn't mess around, stuff like that. Like that, there's really cool stuff with that, and I think designed to like reinvigorate, which doesn't need to be reinvigorated because I feel like it comes up every few months anyway. Get people talking about the Tuvix thing, uh, and builds a story around it. Like I think that's to its credit. I think the idea of somebody gets Tuvixed again and again wants to live and uses this tactic to try to make it even more morally complicated. That there's it's times however many. Like Lower Decks often does, it gets a little chaotic, obviously, and your mileage will vary depending on like your tolerance level for that kind of chaos and extreme humor. I was mostly on board for it. I was pretty with it. I feel like it got a little crazy at the end, a little over the top for me. Uh, but what I did really like about the solution, I love that Talin, the Vulcan character from Wage Duties, is in the movie.
Yeah,
I think
that's my
she's really
favorite part
built
about
in.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
think
like that she was a part of the solution with
yes,
Indy and working together as lower deckers to kind of solve the issue. I think that's the strength of the resolution to it.
yeah, yeah. Mike McMahon being such a fan of the '90s shows, I think it's interesting that in season four we're adding kind of T'Lyn into the mix. In Deep Space Nine in season four they added Worf to the mix. Voyager season four they added Seven of Nine to the mix. I
Seven of
don't think
Nine,
this is an
yeah,
accident that
yeah,
Mike McMahon's following the pattern of kind
yeah,
of shaking up the ensemble a little bit, adding a new element to the mix at that like several seasons in kind of point. But you're right. I agree with that. I think having her being a part of the solution, but I think it just felt really Star Trek to me that T'Lyn has like the technical know-how to theoretically solve the problem, but needs Tendy's more like she's Ryan, but her more human touch, knowing like needs to know who the people are, needs to know something about the people to be able to figure out kind of who's who to split them back up again. They both like Tendy didn't have the technical knowledge the way that T'Lyn did, that level of scientific expertise on that front, and T'Lyn didn't have the knowledge of the people to complete the job. They both needed each other. And like, what's more Star Trek than that? It's the tech, it's the logic, it's the technical solution, and it's also the people touch, that need to come together to solve these things. So
yeah.
I think that was really well done. That to me is like as Star Trek as it gets. So even as I was kind of like wavering a little bit on, all right, like the silliness maybe got a little grating to me at times as the episode kind of rolled out. When that kind of came about and that became the solution, that was like, all right, yeah, I love that. Um, so I'm pretty good with it. I think it's a good episode of Lower Decks. I don't know that it's a great one. I think I prefer the Deep Space Nine episode. Honestly, I think we always do this with Lower Decks. I feel like I have to say it. There's so many Easter eggs. There are so many references. Obviously, we could go
Yeah,
on and on and on about the salamanders from Threshold. Obviously, we see the clown from the Thaw and Michael
yeah,
Sullivan and Dr. Chaotica. That's all
yeah.
great. And
And even within those, there's little like I miss my wife.
yes,
Like these.
yes,
There's like within Easter eggs, there's Easter eggs, and so it's just like we could spend an hour or two
yeah.
on just
There are great
um,
videos out there and great written articles that cover all those things better than we're going to. Like that's not our form. We're going to talk about our thoughts. We'll touch on those things, but we're not here to make sure we reference every single one of these things. Yeah, they're all there. They're great. A lot of them are really cool. But you know, we may not touch on every single one of them, but I love them all. I promise you. Yeah, I think the Michael Sullivan "I miss my wife" line was maybe one of my favorite things. I think "The Least
yeah,
Like" has become such a classic line from a controversial episode of Voyager that some people hate, but I think that line has become so like kind of memed in classic Janeway that reference like that was really well done. I thought that was great. Um, but yeah, do you remember? I mean, how do you feel if the Deep Space Nine episode from last season, this one from for Voyager? Do you have a
I would.
preference? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say that.
Uh-oh, looks like your internet froze. Usually you come right back, so I'll touch until you pop back on. Hopefully here in a second. I'll say I think I prefer the Deep Space Nine episode myself. I think um, the way that the Deep Space Nine episode obviously integrated characters. Two different. I'm kind of glad that Voyager didn't try to shoehorn. As much as I would have loved to have seen Harry Kim or Tom Paris or somebody like that there. I like that they didn't try to just mimic the Deep Space Nine episode, but getting to see Kira, getting to see Quark, and getting to see them in a way that also um, integrated them into the story in a credible way. Like I thought the Deep Space Nine episode really brilliantly kind of created like an old school early Deep Space Nine Quark story, like the kind of Quark story that you would get in those early episodes in the first couple of seasons, and kind of weaved it into the Lower Deck story. Uh, I think that kind of wins out for me, um, but I think both were pretty successful episodes generally. Um, my preference is the Deep Space Nine episode, but it's also early. These things do definitely shift a bit for me. The more I watch them, the more time goes by. You never know. This could change over time. My Before Dan comes back, I'll just quickly touch on my thoughts. Or you know what? Actually, what I'll do is E.R. Mixon's Craziest Theories mentions that he has a controversial take that the um, he thinks the Cerritos is going to be destroyed by the end of the season, and we haven't quite touched on it. Hopefully, when Dan's internet recovers, we'll touch on the sort of linked together element. Here we go. It's coming back now. Welcome back. I was referencing the chat a little bit. E.R. Mixon's Craziest Theories had a thought about where the season might be going with the Cerritos blowing up, and I mentioned I do want to double back before we get into anything else. I talked about my preference is Deep Space Nine episode. You cut out right before you gave your answer. Do you have a preference between season three, season three's Deep Space Nine sort of tribute episode and this one?
Yeah, I prefer the Deep Space Nine tribute.
Yeah, that's what I said.
But again, it's I'm not trying to take away from this episode. I think Bill's right. The first 8-10 minutes of this episode are really really strong and really, especially like at least for Bill and I feel like we're kind of in that realm of our rewatches where we're kind of in that kind of, especially Bill with where he's at in season 2. But no, I just think that I don't know. I really appreciate the willingness to kind of go back to Voyager and really get its due, because I feel like Voyager and Enterprise, I think especially, have really at least taken a kind of a backseat to kind of some of the other, like we've got Picard and I think Deep Space Nine has really elevated itself to kind of a premier like favorite among Star Trek fans. So I think it's really I don't know, really really good to see Voyager still get its day in the sun.
Yeah.
I think with this kind of Lower Decks kind of tribute style, where I think every season I'm guessing we're going to get something similar to this, where we go to kind of a historic to kind of
Hopefully.
play up some of the fan stuff,
Yeah.
which I hope so.
And I think this show can get away with that because Lower Decks as a concept is about. I think the way the show is kind of constructed is it's talking to us, just like those old scientists episode of Stranger Worlds is about being a Star Trek fan. Lower Decks is about being a Star Trek fan. These lower level officers look up to the same people we do as fans. So I think that offers them an opening that they're taking advantage of to occasionally have these wow kind of moments with referencing the things that have happened already. I think the show has an opportunity to do that in a realistic, realistic in quotes, credible way, and I'm glad they're doing it.
Yeah.
Jeff is saying that I am going to come back to your theory, E.R. Mixon, but I want to touch on something before we do it. Seeing Voyager was fun. He likes the DS9 episode better. This one was a little more silly, but both were cool to see. Yep, I would tend to agree. But real quick, as we kind of segue into episode 2, I think the two kind of obvious serialized elements that are probably going to play in season 4. Episode 1 ends with the Klingon bird of prey encountering a random, I guess, Klingon bird of prey. I think it might be the same bird of prey that was in Waves Douche, right? Is that the impression you got?
That's the impression I got watching
Yeah.
the episode. I'm like, oh, we're kind of checking into the same one that we saw in season 2.
And I guess the captain is that Lower Decker guy from that episode. I'm guessing. I don't know for sure. I haven't done enough research to like nail that down. But in any event, they encounter a ship that's mysterious and blows up the bird of prey, and that plays right into the very beginning of episode 2 that we'll get to in a second. But that what is that is going to be obviously, I think, a question that threads through season 4. And then the other thing that ends episode 1 is that in this episode, at least 3 of the 4 of them get promoted to lieutenant, junior grade, and dealing with that, like the promotion and what that does to their status and their friendship. their individual friendships and their friendship as a group. Um, how did you feel about that? Did you expect that? Did you like? How do you feel about any thoughts at all about like they're getting promoted and where we're kind of going
I
with that
I expected a promotion
at some point? Sure.
at some point, but I mean, if we're talking like, this is still, I think, like a long, slow play. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about, some of these, legacy characters and how fast they got promoted,
Yeah.
and so I think that, this is year 4 of kind of being out of the um, academy. So I think, I don't know, and we've kind of, it's always, earlier in the show, they've kind of played with with promotion a little bit with Rutherford to, I think, to some mixed reviews, but I don't know. I think it feels right. I think it, as much as I'd love for these characters to stay lower deckers forever, I think that there's inevitably going to be some change just to move some of these characters forward. And I don't know. I'm just curious to see, like, this. Once, I think, once you get to a certain level, I think some people keep going and some people kind of stay where they're at. And so I think I'm not worried about it. I can see, some people being kind of worried about how, like, it's just going to be so quickly and they're going to get to where we seen before. But I like the idea of at least moving them up a little bit, and it's still junior grade. Like, it's still
Junior officers, like they're
it's a
not.
junior officers.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a bridge crew here. So I think, I don't know, any even, it's hard because even some of our bridge crew can be, I think, classified as lower deckers, so,
Yeah.
at least in my mind. So
Sometimes, yeah.
I'm fine with a promotion here and there, and I think it was really done really well, and I think in true, like, lower deck spirit, I think they want to, like, get promoted together and stay together, and it's still capturing that kind of lower deck essence of the show.
Yeah. Anybody who's ever had a friend group, which is a lot of us, most of us, I would hope, can relate to a lot of the things that I think these characters are dealing with that. Um, so yeah, I agree with that. I think the promotion was, I think, again, doing it in season 4 when these other shows have kind of Deep Space Nine season 4, Worf, Cisco shaving the beard or shaving the head and going to get tea. Like that's the time that these old shows would kind of like shake it up a little bit, and I think it's no accident that this is kind of the point to kind of do a little something to make it keep it fresh and change it up and do some bigger things with the characters. So be interested to see. I think obviously we're going to talk about episode 2 here in a second. That this stuff is going to linger on and it's going to evolve over the season. I think the way that they react to being promoted and how it affects their friendships and their roles on the ship is going to be an ongoing storyline. But this threat, ER mentions Crazy's theory, mentioned that he thinks the Cerritos is going to be destroyed at the end of the season along with these other ships. That's what we're kind of building to, and that's going to shake it up even further. We'll see. I think that would be a bold move to blow up the hero ship in the middle of a show. But it's anything's possible with this. We could be getting the Cerritos A. We've definitely done. We kind of did that pseudo sort of with Discovery becoming Discovery A with the Jump to the Future. Um, you never know. You never know. So far, we've seen this little guy attack non-Federation ships, Klingon bird of prey, and kind of segue into episode 2. Episode 2 opens with a Romulan vessel encountering the same ship and having the same fate as the Klingon bird of prey does at the end of episode 1. We get to see some Romulan lower decks, which is kind of cool, leading up to that attack. But
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about, like, I want to go back and watch it. Like, how do they react? Do they react violently? Do they bring the shields up? Do they bring the weapons online? So I think
I think
that
they
could
both
be
react
something.
differently. I think the Klingons don't. The Klingons they start to talk about it, and the captain is like, "No, there's no honor in blowing up something that doesn't have like any defensive posture or like whatever he says."
Yeah,
And then I think the Romulans were going to blow it up. Doesn't the captain say just get rid of it and keep going kind of thing? So
yeah,
I think they consciously answered that as like having both crews, both ships handle it differently. One, wants to blow it up, one doesn't. So you can't even pin it as a ship comes up to it and starts to get defensive, shields up, weapons activated, and the thing attacks. I think we've consciously, or I think the writers consciously created an answer to that.
Yeah. Okay. That's
So
good.
I think I have
Yeah.
to watch it again, but I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that they do
Yeah.
react differently, both
Yeah.
ships, kind of in the opposite ways that you would expect. You'd think maybe the Klingons would be like, get rid of it, blow it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, but
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
yeah,
We'll see.
we'll see. Obviously, this is going to keep playing out. I'll be interested to see is we're going to get a little tag like this in each episode. Is it going to kind of weave in and out? But obviously, this is going to be an ongoing thread throughout season 4. Um, I mentioned earlier that I think these 2 episodes are really different. The first one really embraces the look back and the sort of the Voyager stuff, where I think episode 2 doesn't really have any of that. It's really an insulated kind of straightforward, lower deck story that is about these characters and puts them in lower decks kinds of situations, and is not as focused on like paying tribute to what came before. So, uh, what did you think of episode 2? We have kind of an A B C plot kind of going here. We have Mariner, Ransom, and kind of a red shirt crewman on this away mission to get a few humans out of an alien zoo. We have Tendi and Rutherford kind of dealing with the fact that many of them were promoted and Rutherford wasn't, and the kind of tension that brings. And then we have Boimler getting his new quarters and not being thrilled with where they are and what it means. What did you think of episode 2? Did one of those stories resonate with you more than the others? Did you like one, not like one?
Yeah.
What did you think?
I really liked the ABC kind of just structure
Yeah, me
again,
too.
and
Kept
that
them all
feels
involved.
really,
Yeah,
yeah. It kept all the crew members involved, and I think it's always like just this little kernel of like, what is it like to get assigned quarters?
yeah,
I like that. I think the biggest one for me is obviously the Mariner one. I
yeah.
like that. Like we're actually showing her problem with getting promoted. Like it's been such a stigma with this character for a while, and I think it's always been like kind of a throwaway line, like she's been, really just tough to promote, and
Yeah,
she's been,
bouncing around.
you know, demoted, promoted, like just kind of bouncing around, like you said, and I like that we kind of show her kind of working through that instead of giving like a throwaway line again, like she's back in Captain Freeman's off or ready room, just getting I don't know,
Shoot out.
yeah, chewed out and just kind of talking about it. Like I really appreciate that we're kind of I don't know, getting some like showing it instead of like, and there's some back and forth with her and Ransom, but I think that
Really good stuff, I
like
think.
yeah, really good stuff, and I think kind of just an interesting take on a different command style and a different
Yeah.
um, relationship with a superior officer. I think is really interesting.
Mhm.
Um, we get some really good Easter eggs again with Ransom and Shax in the exercise room with the specific outfits that you kind of flip the it's I don't know, it's really good, I think. But yeah, I think it's the Mariner one for me. But not to say that I was like wanting to get back to a certain A, B, or C plot. I just think that it just kept really everybody involved, and I think it just plays into the hand of there's something out there for everybody and some storylines out there for everybody. So it's like, yeah, I think moving forward, it's always tough for me to be like, oh, what I think there's something out there for everybody.
I think I would agree that I think my favorite thing about the episode is the Mariner and Ransom relationship. I think that's been building for a couple of seasons now, and I think Ransom's been really good for a while now. Actually, I think he was really good last season with a lot of these kind of similar storylines, trying to take her reluctantly at first under his wing,
Yeah.
and now like kind of almost embracing the suck of it. Like I'm going to turn her around. I'm not going to be like all these other commanding officers who just have enough and demote her back and get rid of her. Like I'm going to be the guy who figures her out and makes her succeed. And I think that's like yet again that's like it's done in a really lower decks kind of way. It's silly and comedic and outlandish at times, but it's Star Trek. Like that's the kind of thing that you see all the time in Star Trek. That's what Janeway did with Tom Paris. Like like we've been through this before in different ways, and this is fresh and different, but it's kind of true to form for the show for the franchise, I guess. And I think Ransom's kind of been bubbling up as like a really strong character for a couple of years now, and this
Yeah.
might have been his best episode, I think.
Yeah, he has such a great arc because I think he started as a second or a first officer trope, like the
Yeah,
good looking, you know, it's,
yeah,
but I think that he just slowly through the show, he just morphed into a really good superior officer, and he's wanting to help
yeah.
and develop and work on some of these lower deckers. And I just think that's really cool that he starts as like this such, I don't know, because how many second officers
Stereotypical.
are pegged as like the good looking kind
Yeah,
of, you know, very aspiring type of officer, but no,
yeah.
he's really kind of down to earth and
Mhm.
really cares about his crew.
Yeah, he's definitely. They start out. He starts out, and you think he's just like a poor man's Riker. You know, he's a ladies' man.
Yeah.
He's ripped. He's like, kind of like Riker is in the first season. You know, like he's kind of echoing all that stuff. But like you said, he's definitely evolved into a little more complicated a guy, and he is all those things. But I think we're seeing him deal with things and getting to know him a little bit better. So yeah, I think that's been really good. I think that's really well handled here. I think Moopsie is going to be a another like classic Star Trek creature. Uh, you see a lot of that on Twitter now, predictably. Um, and I've been walking around. I've been saying Moopsie myself, like just around the house. Um, so I think I'm kind of going back and forth on which one I like better. I think I'm kind of colored by being so in love with the opening of Twovix and the nostalgia of that, but I think the story's better here. I think the second episode might be the better episode, and I'm still going back and forth. I haven't totally made up my mind yet, but
Yeah,
I'm
I can confidently
leaning that
say
way.
that
You think
for
so?
me, yeah, I think
Too?
that the better episode is two, which is tough, dude. You know, I love Voyager, and then no knock against that episode,
No,
but
yeah,
I
that's my
like
yeah,
that, and this episode feels more true Lower
yeah,
Decks episode to me than the first episode,
yeah.
the season premiere. So for me, it's the second episode.
I think we get more true to form, really good character stuff for everybody. Like you said, the ABC plot really is a classic Lower Decks style as well. A lot of Lower Decks episodes take that approach to make sure that they're all involved and get their own independent things to do, just like TNG would and Voyager would. Sometimes, yeah, I think that format really suits Lower Decks, and it's really on display here. I think the way that it picks up the ball from the end of episode one and takes it right into the Tendi and Rutherford kind of stress about who got promoted and who didn't, and um, the twist that Rutherford's been declining promotions because of this very thing, kind of
Yeah,
like being
yeah,
promoted this. I believe, like you think back, and a lot of these guys, the lower deckers, have been involved in like these big episodes where they've solved problems and been part of the solution and big things. Especially Rutherford, like he's been a part of big engineering heroics and stuff like that. So it makes you wonder, like, how is he not promoted? And this kind of answers the question. He's been offered, but didn't want it. He didn't want to be the only lieutenant in the group. And there's a really classic like workplace. I've mentioned this before. Lower decks can be really good at like the old
yeah.
school TNG kind of like workplace drama. Like sometimes the way to go is to like ask for it. Like he turned things down in the past, and all he needed to do is kind of ask to be promoted at this point because of things he had already done. And sometimes at work and in different jobs, the way to go is to ask the question, and you know, I think this is
And
kind of getting at that.
Yeah, and he's seen Boimler, like how the dynamic changed with Boimler leaving the ship, going to a different ship, and
Yeah,
how that kind of the whole
for the
thing. So I
rep.
just
Yeah,
think, yeah, I think it makes sense for me.
yep, agreed. Um, Yeah, I'm on board with pretty much everything in this episode. I think the gags and the Boimler plot I think are a little silly, and I don't totally believe. I think Alex Perry said in his Trekcore review, like, didn't totally buy that Boimler wouldn't know to just turn down the the contrast in the in the port view when Rutherford just walks into it
Yeah,
real quick. Like, Boimler's such a Starfleet nerd that I I think that's a tall ask. I like the gag of it. I like, the quarters that are right outside the Bussard collectors would really suck. Uh,
I kind of wish that we got a and maybe just because I'm kind of a Seinfeld nerd, because I I kind of wish that there was kind of a nod to the Seinfeld. I don't know if you've seen Seinfeld, Bill.
some of
This
it.
maybe is out of left field, but Kramer has a similar situation with his apartment, and
Mm,
Jerry goes to Kramer's apartment, and it is like this beaming red because there's a fast food sign right across it,
right.
and so it's just I don't know. I wish we had maybe got that,
It's
but
probably inspired by that,
yeah,
I would imagine. Yeah, so I was pretty happy with episode two. ER Mixon's crazy theory says this episode wins because it has Moopsy. You can't beat Moopsy. I think that's going to be an opinion that a lot of people share. People love Moopsy.
and the menagerie trope I
The
think is
menagerie,
fun.
sure. Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely. Um, yeah, I was pretty happy with these two episodes. I think I wouldn't categorize either one of them as like the best of Lower Decks. I don't know that either one is quite as great. Obviously, as Wage Douche is. Wage Douche is a classic. I think, one of Star Trek's best episodes. There's episodes in the first three seasons kind of spread around the Crisis Point episodes. They're to me like the upper tier of Lower Decks, and I wouldn't put either one of these necessarily in that category. But I think Lower Decks has some stuff in the opposite tier as well. I'm not a fan, as we've covered many times, of the Peanut Hamper episode last season. These episodes are both way ahead of episodes of Lower Decks that I'm not fond of, like that one. And there are a couple, just like there are a couple of episodes of kind of all the shows that I'm a little less enthused about. Um, these are two, like, in my opinion, like, pretty strong, pretty good, upper half of the middle of the pack Lower Decks episodes. And uh, I kind of wish, especially given the strike and the dry spell we're about to be on, I kind of wish we only got one. To be honest, I wish it was 10 episodes in 10 weeks, just to spread it out.
yeah,
And I think both of these episodes probably would maybe benefit from having a week of their own. I think because of at least how different they are in my mind, that it invites a comparison. And of course, as somebody who ranks everything, like, I compare everything. So I'm kind of prey to do that anyway. But uh, I'm usually in favor of just put one episode on a week and give that episode its week in the sun, and let people kind of really dive into one, as opposed to automatically comparing the two.
yeah, that's tough.
Yeah,
I real quick, just
yeah,
before we get out of here, I think it's tough for me, like, coming into Lower Decks, trying to like tamper and manage my expectations coming off of such a strong season of Strange New Worlds. Like, I feel like it's so hard to, and it just, I think that having two episodes just kind of played right into that, because I think I was just automatically saying, like, okay, well, which one was a better episode, or how does this rank?
yeah.
And I think it's just hard, just coming off such a strong season of Strange New Worlds, I think it's, um, I don't know, trying to manage my expectations
Yeah.
kind of week to week. I think would have helped if I
Sure.
only just had one episode, like you mentioned, just to give, like, I don't know, Day in the Sun. And I know it's hard because each episode is 30 minutes, and so technically this is only one of kind of a normals,
Yeah.
live action episode. So I get it, and I think maybe they wanted to, I don't know,
I
help
think it was the Star Trek Day timing.
fill the Star Trek Day a little
I
bit,
think
but
that was part of it.
I don't know. So and that's fine. I get it, and it all makes sense because Star Trek Day, we're we're dealing with kind of historical Star Trek kind of setup, and so I definitely get it. But yeah, just trying to manage my expectations throughout this season of Lower Decks, I think is going to be a definite struggle.
Yeah, it's. I last year I really struggled with that early in the season. Like I mentioned earlier, I got better with it as it went on, and I have to remember, like it's a constant reminder of myself. Like this show's different. It's not Strange New Worlds. It's not Picard. Like it's not aiming to do. It's kind of consciously trying to be the opposite. It's embracing the funny, the light, the more casual elements of Star Trek, the stuff that we both, I know, really like about old school Star Trek. The more day in the life aspects of it, the imagining what it's like to live on this ship and have these kinds of friendships and living and working together on these, like, these are things that draw us to Trek, right? And they're things that are largely either absent or alluded to in some of these new shows. Not Strange New Worlds as much because of the style of that. They get to dive into it a little bit more. But Discovery and Picard, because of they're more like balls to the wall, serialized kind of urgent storytelling. We don't get as much of that like on the surface like we did on Voyager and Deep Space Nine
Yeah,
and so
true.
Lower Decks is like
True.
leaning heavily into those components. But like you said, when you especially maybe with me around asking you questions like which one's better, what do you like better, how do you feel, what's your favorite, like I'm
Fueling the fire, so to
fueling the
speak.
fire,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
comparisons. Yeah, when you're comparing it to Strange New Worlds and Picard and all this stuff, it maybe invites some uncomfortable, like, well, but I have to constantly remind myself, like, no, Lower Decks is awesome at doing this thing, and and time will any like, oh, I gotta adjust. Usually, time brings me back to like, yeah, no, it's a different flavor. It's a different kind of, um, you know, different. It's just a different tone, and it's really good at what it does. And it's an important part of Star Trek that it focuses on, I think. So,
yeah,
but we do have to calibrate to it, I think, especially
yeah.
when
I
it's
think so.
hot off the
Yeah,
heels of really, really strong Strange New Worlds.
yeah,
Like I've said a couple times on Twitter in the last couple of months, like as crappy as 2023 has been off screen with the strike and Discovery being, ending after season 5 and Prodigy nonsense and all that stuff, like the on-screen product of Picard season 3 and Stranger World season 2 has been really, really strong. So the competition's tough out there. If the shows are really good right now, I think. So. Um, All right, I think that'll about do it. We're about an hour. Um, there's a lot that we didn't talk about with these two episodes, and I would encourage folks out there, look at the really good video content that's out there on a lot of these other channels. There's good written reviews out there, Trek Core, Trek Movie. There's a lot of sources out there to get like a written review of the episode, but also like a summary of all the Easter eggs and the references and the little things that are out there. A lot of good places to cover that stuff, and I can't compete with that, and I wouldn't want to. And I like to have quick take conversations about how we felt and what kind of stood out to us. That's what we tried to do here for the last hour. So for those of you who are watching on replay, hope you enjoyed it. Hope we filled your hour reasonably entertainingly. And thank you to Jeff and ER Mixon's Crazy Theories for sharing your thoughts in chat as well with these episodes and Lower Decks as a whole so far. So, any kind of last thoughts before we?
I don't think so. Really glad that Lower Decks is back, and I'm really excited that there's new Star Trek on. So, yeah, Bill said it. The discussion doesn't have to stop here. Twitter still and Discord are the best places to do that. Thank everybody for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about more Star Trek, and we'll see you guys then.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Take care.